My name is Daisy Castro, and I'm the mother of Marie Bruner.
Okay. How would you describe Marie's race and heritage?
I can only think of her as being white. She's more me than anybody else.
Okay, why do you think that is?
I've just never felt any different. I just feel like my children are mine.
Okay.
And the most part of them, it comes from me. It's the way I feel.
All right. Describe any events connected to Marie's race in which you remember being either comfortable or uncomfortable.
The only one that stands out to me is when she was in the first grade. When she there was a little boy, a little black boy that was the first black child in the school in Deep South to be in an all-white school. And he sat in a desk right next to the teacher, and it was because most of the kids picked on him. I thought maybe he was getting in trouble a lot, but he wasn't. The teacher said that it was because she didn't want anybody bothering him, and that he was a good student. Marie always called him the chocolate boy, and I didn't know where that was coming from, if she was practicing being prejudiced like the other children were. So I sat her down and asked her why did she call him the chocolate boy. Would he she said, well, he likes being called the chocolate boy. He likes chocolate ice cream better than vanilla. And I said, well, you're not showing him that he's so different because he's black, are you? I didn't want her to do that. And she said, no. She said, people think I'm Chinese, but I'm not Chinese. And I tell them I'm Mexican. And they don't, part Mexican. And I said, did you feel bad about that? And she said, no, she didn't. So one thing that I feel like helped in racial issues with, there are some of my children that said that they experienced it, but I don't ever remember Marie complaining about it. Now, she herself may remember things, but I think being in the military and taking us to different places where it was not uncommon for my race to be married to someone of a different race. And there was a lot of diversity in military life. And we went to Japan and the Philippines and New York, South Dakota. So the children were, they were not, well, my youngest child was raised here in the South, but my children was not raised in the South, mostly. We went to, there were brief times that we were in Georgia, but most of the time they were raised in different places in the country and overseas.
Okay. How would you describe the relationship between you and Marie's father?
It was rocky. And I know that a lot of it had to do with his race. The men that was raised by mostly in Mexico. A lot of Mexican people have changed over the years and things like that, but they're very dominant. They feel like they've got to be the head of the household, the head of the wife, the boss, and they didn't really find being unfaithful or whatever as a horrible thing. They felt like men do things like that. Now, if it was if the shoe was on the other foot, they wouldn't think it was right for a woman to do it. But that was just a thing that men do. So he never felt awfully guilty about it. And it caused a lot of trouble. I spent 36 years of my life with him, and he was unfaithful.
Okay. What family events can you remember that had any sort of racial or ethnic overtones? Can you think of any family events?
I don't think so, not in the family. But before we were married, my dad was against the marriage because he felt like I would be, and he tried to tell me, and I didn't believe it. But then after being married for a while, I realized that he had his points. I mean, like when we were travel and things like that, I realized that he had his points. But he thought that that I would be an outcast, that I would never be able to, in any type things like church or the community or anything that goes on, he felt like that I would always feel different and always be treated different. And I was so young at the time, and I don't even know if age has anything to do with it, to tell you the truth. When you feel like you're in love, you don't think about things like that. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter to me, and I didn't think that it should matter to anybody. And I felt like it was wrong, and I wasn't happy about it, so I didn't give up on getting married.
Well, tell me about meeting your husband.
How did I meet him?
Mm-hmm. How did you meet him, and how did you guys get together romantically, and just tell the story.
All right. Well, I had another boyfriend at the time that was in a serious motorcycle accident, and he was in the hospital for just about a month. He was in pretty bad shape, and I'd go to the hospital from Warner Robins to Macon and missed a lot of time in school, but I was so distraught about how injured he was. And my older sister, she's 2 years older than I am, started dating my husband at the time. And she brought him to the hospital with some magazines and things for my boyfriend to read. And and they came back several times through the week, which was quite a distance. And I noticed that Timo was watching me instead of paying much attention to my sister. But I just blew it off. But then my boyfriend that was laid up in the bed noticed it and was jealous of it and more upset about it than I even paid any attention to. So the last day that I went to visit this boyfriend in the hospital, we were there at the hospital, and he looked over at my husband and asked him if he had met a certain girl that I felt like was slutty. And he said, well, she's really hot stuff. You really like her. You need to get Daisy to introduce you. You'd like her. And when we left, I was just very steaming and felt like he was betraying me. And on the way home, Timo, which became my husband, started saying that was the wrong thing to do, that I deserved better than that. And so I told him that. I said, well, there's plenty of fish in the sea. I don't even need him. So that was the way that happened. And then he started calling me instead of asking to speak to my sister. He'd want to talk to me. And then he started coming to the house, bringing pies and cakes and things like that to my daddy. And all of us had chores in our house, and my chore was to clean up the kitchen, the dishes and everything after dinner. And he'd get in there and do all the dishes for me and help me with all the chores. And he just had a lot of charm about him, which I thought was so important.
Okay. I remember at one point you told me some stories about him also helping your family financially. And that
He did. My family was struggling financially, and he offered to pay the electric bill, and he did, and he'd bring groceries to the house every now and then. And I thought, well, if he treats my family like that, then he will always be have my back. And I just felt like it was another plus.
Was race even a consideration when you guys started talking marriage?
It was with my dad, because that was when he came in and said that we would, he had certain things that he felt like was so important, and he felt like that I would be an outcast, that I would struggle, that it was just going to happen. And he also wanted him to become a member of the church that we went to. He was a deacon at a Baptist church. And when Timo decided that he was going to get baptized and join the church and everything, didn't really have anything to do with a change of heart, because in his heart he was still that Catholic person that he'd been brought up to be. So, but he fooled my daddy into thinking that he had been responsible to leading him to the Lord.
Oh, wow.
And so that was a big factor in why my dad even eventually consented to us getting married, because he felt like he was a changed man, and that he'd been responsible for helping him get there, and things was going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did you ever feel like an outcast?
There were some times that I felt like, that there was people around me, that really thought that he was just so different,
Mm.
And I could tell that they were prejudiced. But the main thing that I think that Timo felt more paranoid about it than I did. And I tried to shake it. He would get so upset if anyone called him a Mexican. He wanted to be called Latin American or Chicano. I don't even know where he got Chicano from, but that's what he wanted to be called. And when we traveled, he always felt like if we pulled into certain motels, if they saw us together, they wouldn't rent him the room, and he was just very nervous when we traveled through Alabama, because there was things going on in the country at the time. There was burnings and everything in Alabama, and he'd want me to turn away from the windows and not to look out, not to get out, and even he was just afraid that something could happen to us because I was in the car with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to get him to shake that all off, that it didn't matter and everything. And eventually, he did start saying that he was a Mexican-American, because I think that somehow I did have a part of him feeling proud of that, because I just kept instilling in him that he should be proud of who he was, that everybody came from somewhere, and that he didn't need to feel ashamed. And if people had problems with us being married, that was their problem and not ours. Mm-hmm. That it was an ugly thing to be.
Aside from talking about it, were there other ways that you tried to embrace his culture?
I think I did. I think that when I went there, went to Mexico and everything, I really enjoyed it. Being around the people, I felt like they were fun-loving people, that they had good hearts, and I learned to. I spoiled him by learning to try to fix Mexican food, and eventually, I think I became. Since I started so young, I think that I became a better Mexican cook than some of the Mexicans I know. And he didn't like American food. And at the time, when we lived in Warner Robins, I don't even remember a Mexican restaurant being around. There was very few around there. In fact, he was probably the first Mexican that I ever saw. Mm-hmm. So, and when we'd go to different places, there was none of it around, so he missed it. So I think I tried to learn to cook the way he liked to cook. I enjoyed the people, you know, I listened to the music with him. And I feel like I did.
Did that become a factor in raising your children and Marie?
I try to teach the children to love the Mexican people, and I think they did. I think that it helped them to accept any race of people around them, and I would tell them that they were no better than anyone else, but they were just as good as anyone else. And that was something I tried to instill in all my children.
Okay. Did language play a role in Marie's upbringing?
Only when we would be around people that, like her grandmother and her aunts didn't speak any English or anything like that. So it was, but I think that because we visited there so many times when they were babies and coming up and everything, they didn't think it was such a bad thing. They just accepted it. My husband had very little patience in trying to teach anybody Spanish. And I myself don't have I can't roll my tongue, and pronunciation and everything was difficult for me. Over the years, I got where I could understand what was being said around me. But I was never able to actually, I'd try phrases and things like that. Mm-hmm. But, and I think that they understood that I did understand what was going around. Mm-hmm. But I definitely didn't ever understand it all well enough to know if they were saying bad things. Mm-hmm. And his mother, she tried to talk with me even in Spanish, and she tried to make me understand what she was trying to say when she'd come for her long visits when we the first few years that we were married. Mm-hmm. So,
was it different living in Texas than it was in other places?
In Lubbock, Texas, they were more prejudiced than anywhere else, and that's where we actually lived. They just didn't. They were very prejudiced about white people being married to Mexicans. They just didn't like them.
Were there other couples there? Were there other mixed races?
Yeah, there was. Okay. There was a few in the military life. Okay. There was, but not as much as there is today. But it was a few.
So,
that was before they started to school or anything like that. Okay. The children were still small during that time. Marie was born in Lubbock, Texas.
Okay. How do you think the world has changed with respect to race and mixed race marriages during Marie's lifetime?
I think it's changed a lot, to be honest. I mean, you see diversity everywhere around you, especially here in the Atlanta area. And I think even in South Georgia it has changed a lot. There's more and more of it. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say that hindsight is 20/20, that we always can see the past differently in the present. If you could go back and redo anything, is there anything?
I would never marry as young as I did. As far as the race doesn't have anything to do with what I would have done. I mean, I would have still married a Mexican if that was the person that came into my life. I know that I'm not prejudiced, even if I get teased about being prejudiced. But I would have definitely not got married as a child. And that's what I was, a child. And I would have tried to get a better education. Even though we were not financially able, I would have loved to finish school and gone on to being some kind of social work or something like that, which I eventually got into to a degree, you know. That would have been what I would have liked to have done, and I think that's where I would have done well. And I would not have married anybody that didn't have the same morals that I had, or anybody that had temper or anybody that did not know how to treat children, and there was just so much difference. Our marriage lasted a long time because I just believed in marriage.
Do you think some of those differences were cultural or race related?
Some of it was cultural, but some of it was just personality. Because I don't think all Mexicans are going to treat their children the way he treated his children, and I don't think all Mexicans are going to treat their wives the way he treated his wife, and everything. And so culture might have had something to do with some of it, but it didn't have anything to do with his personality.
Okay. So, is there anything else you would like to share?
I can't think of it.
All
I
right.
mean, if there's anything you want to ask me, just
Okay.
feel free.
Well,
Do my
thanks,
best.
Mom. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
So, was that enough?
That's enough. Thank you.